To illuminate the often unseen mental health challenges faced by first responders, police officers, firefighters, paramedics, and 911 dispatchers, by sharing their stories, fostering understanding, and promoting resources for support and healing. We aim to break down stigma, advocate for improved mental health services within the first responder community, and inspire hope and resilience. This is the Weight We Carry podcast.
What's going on, guys? My name is Bart with the Weight We Carry podcast, and today we have a Dr. Keven McNeill on the show with us. How you doing, Doc?
I'm great, thank you.
If you'd like, give our viewers a further description of what you do and where you come from.
Sure. My name is Keven McNeill. I'm from the northeastern part of Connecticut. I've been in the first responder game for 28 years, 19 of which I was a police officer, and the rest volunteer and per diem firefighter EMT.
Awesome. And before we jumped on here, you said you do a lot of public speaking and you also have written a book. Can you give us some further information about that? Sure.
So I'm very passionate about mental health, and I know we're going to get into it as we get further into this podcast, but it's something that I take really serious. Never did when I initially started, but as I moved through my career, I realized that if you don't prioritize mental health, it's going to be a problem. And it can easily end your career. So because of that, I've become a strong advocate up in our area in the Northeast. And I'm out there always talking about the signs of PTSD and how to deal with them in ways that you can process your trauma so you come out the other side whole and you're able to continue your career. So eventually all that led into a book, and now it's somewhat starting to go viral. So I'm out there speaking more and actually getting outside of Connecticut, which can be a little scary because it's a big world out there. But, I know the message is strong, and I know that folks can benefit from hearing it.
Absolutely. So, Keven, you spent nearly 3 decades in public safety, starting as a junior firefighter and then serving as a police officer. Can you walk us through what first drew you into the line of work and what those early years were like for you?
Sure. So, I started in the fire service at the age of 16, and really what drew me into it, I'd love to tell you that I wanted to help people. And I mean, certainly that's a part of it. But really my story started when I was 8 years old. When my best friend was killed in a motor vehicle crash. And unfortunately I witnessed that event, and I saw his lifeless body on the side of the road, and it stuck with me. And I made a silent promise to him that I was going to do whatever I could so that this would never happen to somebody again. And eventually that led me into that passion, that drive led me into the fire service. But I always knew I wanted to be a police officer. So, it's one of those things that I started in the fire service because somebody told me to be a police officer, you should volunteer your time and get experience in the first responder community, and that'll be great on your resume. So I just started building my resume in the fire service, and eventually, once I was 21, I took the test to become a police officer, and I was hired almost immediately. And just after I turned 21, I entered the police academy, and the rest is history. So, but really, the drive and passion was, unfortunately, the death of my best friend.
So over those years, you've taken on many roles, like you said, a firefighter, a police officer, instructor, now an advocate. Looking back, what moments stand out to you as some of the proudest or most defining?
Oh, there's been a lot of moments throughout my career. And I think the pride part is probably few and far between, because really being a first responder, it's just a lot of just going to calls and back-to-back calls, and you're seeing all this trauma and all this stuff going on. But every now and then something kind of bleeds through where you have a moment where you look and you're like, wow, I just saved a life. For me, that was 2008. I was working patrol. I had been ordered in. I'd worked the evening shift, and I'd been ordered in to midnight shift. So I was already kind of in a pissy mood about that. I had a busy day the next day, so I was getting ordered in, and I knew I was gonna have to be up the full next day. And I was already tired and in a bad mood. And I'd been on a traffic stop, and I was looking into a possible DUI offense. So of course, my entire night was going sideways, and I just wanted to go home, and that's really where my mindset was. And I heard over the radio a bunch of units being sent up to an apartment complex for a possible structure fire. And it was pretty normal response in the city where if there's a structure fire, the police were dispatched mostly for traffic. But in this particular case, the first officer arrived on scene and he just started screaming into the radio. He's like, "I need help up here. Send everybody." And when you hear something like that in the city and the alert tones go out, I mean, you drop everything and you go. And I pretty much just took the guy's keys and I threw him into the woods and I'm like, walk home. And I flew up to the western part of the city. And as I'm coming over the bridge, I just see the orange glow in the air. And I'm like, wow, this thing's going to be rocking. And I was very familiar with the apartment complex. It was huge. It was something like 600 feet long. And it had couple hundred units in it. So it was going to be an occupied building. Clearly, and one of those things like if it took off, I knew it was going to be bad. And especially with my fire experience, I kind of was surmising as I was responding, like this is just going to be bad. And the more updates I was getting on the radio, the worse it sounded. And so when I got there, there was fire blowing out of kind of the CD corner of the complex, and it was already through the roof at that side. So we regrouped real quick and said, we need to start rescuing people. We need to start getting in there because the fire department was quickly overwhelmed. It went from a first alarm to an 11 alarm fire within about 10 minutes. They flooded, they called for help all over the southeastern part of Connecticut. So we knew help was coming, but you have people asleep at 1 o'clock in the morning and nobody has any idea that this fire is going on and it's raging and it's spreading, and there's an open cockloft in between the entire building. So we knew it was going to spread quickly because we were actually seeing it spread. So we went in full rescue mode, and there's about 13 of us on shift that night, and we just started crawling into the building and pulling people out left and right. And I don't know how many folks we pulled out, but I just remember it was the whole thing was just a blur, and it was just constantly trying to outrun the fire. And we went from closest to the fire away from there to the other end of the building and just booting indoors and grabbing people out of their bed, and people thought it was a police raid. So like people wanted to fight us, and we're like, no, that the building's on fire, get out. And I remember this one part where I got into this apartment and I could see the fire coming because it had in the center of the apartment complex, it was open. So it was like a full circle, but it was open, and the fire was spreading through. And I remember just seeing the sliding glass windows, just the orange glow, and thinking, wow, this is really amazing to see this. And then thinking, I better get out of here because if that busts through the window, I'm dead. And it was just like that. And there were like little moments. But one moment that really stuck with me is when we figured, okay, I think we got everybody out, but we're not sure. We were in the back of the building, and I'm just watching it roll across the roof. And I'm thinking to myself, I'm like, how many people are dead inside? How many people did we miss? And I was talking to my partner, and we were like, just going back, and like, we're really upset about it. We're like kind of disappointed in ourselves that we didn't react quicker than we did. And the whole night was kind of that theme. And we're trying to do accountability. We're trying to figure out where everybody is, but the numbers were coming back, and they didn't know how many survivors we had, how many potential fatalities. And we were kind of just going back and forth. And then, eventually about 9 o'clock the next morning, I went home thinking we had lost a lot of lives. And they were early estimates, 50 people. And we were kind of like really upset about it. And so I went home and I barely slept, but I'm like, I volunteered to come back in for evening shift to work the security detail at the building because they were putting cops at every corner because they were still sifting through. And I came back and I went to the command post and thinking, they're going to give me this astronomical number of fatalities. And the commander was like, hey, you guys saved everybody last night. You got everybody out of that building. There's not one fatality. And I was just so relieved. And, that was a moment in my career where I'm like, all my training in the fire, it had nothing to do with my police training. All my training in the fire service came to that one moment in my life that because the decisions we made very quickly, we were able to save, hundreds of lives that night. It was only 13 officers that saved hundreds of lives. The firefighters themselves, they were so busy trying to stop the fire that they didn't even go in to try to do rescues because they were trying to get water. There were water issues. There was all these issues that they couldn't go in full rescue mode. And we went in and of course, after the fact, we were joking with the firefighters and going back and forth. And, we're like, we got to do your job this time. And, it was, a friendly banter, but it was one of the things where the city, they actually acknowledged us, and they came back and said, as a result of your actions, we're going to give you all a bravery medal and a hero award for the city. And it was
Wow.
a very proud moment in my career.
Like you said, all that training really came together, and that's why you train to failure. When those incidents happen, you better be able to perform.
Yeah, it was one of those things that if we didn't react as quickly as we did, there would have been massive lives lost.
Sure.
And even the fire department acknowledged that during the ceremony. They said, because we acted so quickly, and they did their job too. I'm not trying to detract from the fire department. They did an awesome job, but they were up against it. I mean, you had 2 engine crews and a tower crew were on the initial attack, and it's like they needed probably 100 firefighters on that initial approach.
Yeah.
But it took a while for everybody to get there.
So as you said, you've been recognized for your bravery and life-saving efforts. What did it mean to you to be in situations where people's lives truly depended on your actions?
That's a great question. There are times in my career where I succeeded, and there are times where I failed. There's times where, it's not that I locked up or I didn't do what I was supposed to do, but it's just it was like the Swiss cheese moment. Everything kind of fell together, and a life was lost. And there's one particular incident. Even looking back, it was 20 years ago now. Looking back, I still have some guilt associated with it, where I thought I could save this person's life, and unfortunately, it didn't pan out that way. And really, what it came down to is my former police department. Before I went to the city, I worked for a small rural department, and out there, we would cover 50 square miles with one officer, and then our backup was the state police. So you're really on your own as a cop. And it wasn't a busy community. It was actually a really nice community to work in. And one particular night, or actually during the day, it was a blizzard, and I was grabbing a coffee at the gas station, and a call came out for an unresponsive person. And at this time, we're having an issue in town with heroin. So my mind immediately went to, oh, here we go. It's another overdose. And that was before Narcan and all that stuff. So like, really the only thing we could do is, try to breathe for the person. So kind of where my mind was at. And I was working solo, so I had no backup other than the South Patrol of the troop. So I knew they were coming from a distance. It was snowing. The plows hadn't come out yet. So the roads were crappy. And the fire department at the time was a volunteer paid ambulance, volunteer fire. So I knew the ambulance was coming, but they were a distance out, and I was only like less than a block away. So I responded, and as I'm walking up to the house, it was eerily quiet, and I knocked on the front door, and nobody answered. So I went around to the back, and as I go to knock on the back door, this lady shows up at the door, just opens it. She's frantic, and she hands me a blanket, and she's like, "He's not breathing." And I look down, and it's a baby. And I found out later it's a 6-month-old or 6-week-old. And I went, my first thought was, shit. I'm trying to think back to CPR. I had never done CPR on a child before. I'm trying to think back, from all the training I had, and I'm trying to, do the ABCs, trying to figure out what to do. And I'm checking for a pulse, and there's no pulse. And there was some blood coming from his nose. And I'm trying to, figure out what to do. So I started compressions, and then I started breathing, back stuff, flipping the baby over, hitting the back. I was doing everything I could think of. And I'm thinking to myself, this isn't going to work. He's not going to live. And he was still warm to the touch. He was still, very flaccid, but there's just he wasn't responding to what I had been trained to do. And, I remember during all this chaos, there was this little girl. She had to be about 4 or 5 years old. And I make eye contact with her as I'm doing compressions. And she says to me, "Please save my brother." And I'm like trying not to break down and lose it. And I was 22 at the time, 23. So I'd only been a cop for a short period of time. And I'm like trying not to break down and trying to save this baby and thinking to myself, like, this isn't going to work. And ambulance shows up. So I pass over patient care, and I'm just like kind of in shock myself. And they transport the baby to the nearest hospital, and I end up going up because now at this point you got to go from medical to an investigation. So you have to figure out, why this happened. And so my mindset was trying to investigate. So I had to take statements from everybody. And I find out from the dad that he had tried CPR, but we would find out later during the autopsy that when he was trying to do the breaths, he blew out the child's lungs. So that's why the blood was coming and the purge was coming out. So during all this investigation and trying to figure out everything, the sergeant comes up to me, and the sergeant, outside of work, he's a good guy. As a sergeant, he was a little rough around the edges, and he says to me, what do you got? And I said, Sergeant, this is what I try to do, blah, blah. And I have blood all over my uniform, and I'm like trying to keep it together. And he said in the middle of the conversation, he's like, well, listen, this shit happens. You just gotta keep going.
Bottle it up.
Yeah. And he goes, oh, by the way, you're ordered in for evening shift tonight. They booked off your buddy, your partner's not coming in. And I'm like, Sarge, I got to go home. Like, I can't do this. He's like, nope, you're ordered in. He's like, if you need to go home and get a change of uniform, you can get a change of uniform, but we're not, you're ordered in. And so I spent that whole evening. Hope, sorry, my dog.
No, it's so good.
Sorry. Hope, by the way, everybody, this is Hope, the therapy dog. Oh,
awesome.
She sees me. She probably is
picking up on your emotions there.
Yeah. She does this. But yeah, so the sergeant ordered me in, and it was that night that I made the decision that I was like, I'm going to leave this department. If I'm not going to be supported, my mental health, I'm going to leave the department. So, and I did. I applied and I went on to the city about 4 weeks after that event.
And it is any incident you go on, whether, it's an adult, but when it comes to children, it hits totally different. Especially, you said you're around 22 years old. You're still a kid yourself. It is like so young. I didn't get into EMS until I think I turned just 30. I didn't grow up in as a fire brat, or I didn't have a dad around that was a firefighter or anything like that. So, and I don't even know why I got into it, but I'm glad I did. So almost 20 years into it now, it's one of the best decisions I made. But even though, it's taken a toll mentally on myself.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, at one point in your career, you experienced a violent assault during a traffic stop. And you can go into as much detail as you're comfortable doing, but
sure.
Can you talk about that incident and how it changed things for you personally and professionally?
So in 2016, I had been working midnights for a few years, which anybody that works midnights, I'm sure you're going to be like, oh, man, you just feel like a zombie, right? Like you're just exhausted all the time. You can never get caught up on your sleep. And the schedule we worked was a 5 and 2. So I was never caught up on my sleep. And I had done that for years. So sleep deprivation was a normal part of my life. And I remember this night, I was really excited because it was my last night on midnights. I was going to days. I finally got my bid to go to days. And so I was going to work 7 to 3, like great schedule. I was excited because I could reintroduce myself to my family. And I was just so excited. And I was in a really good mood this night. And the plan was I was going to stay up all day and go out and do stuff with my family during the day and then try to bounce myself back into a normal sleep cycle. So I had this whole plan, just really in a good mood. And about an hour before the end of my shift, so I was getting off at 7 a.m. And I was like, I got to go get fuel, and I was going to clean the car and just do a couple things and button everything up. And as I was driving to the gas pumps, I hear what they call signal 1. And a signal 1 is an officer needs assistance. It's a priority call. It's where you drop the hammer. If a cop calls that, like everybody in the city's going. And I heard him call a signal 1. I first heard him call a traffic stop. And I'm like, who the hell is stopping a car at 6 a.m? Like, I was thinking that, like, I was a little annoyed. I'm like, who is stopping a car? Like, usually it's the quiet time and everybody, everybody's kind of tucking in for the end of their shift. Yeah. But he stopped the car. He's a very aggressive officer. So, it wasn't surprising, but at the same time, I'm like, what the hell? So I hear him stop a car. And then within about 3 minutes, I hear signal 1, semi backup. And I'm like, shit, like, okay. So I floor it. I'm screaming. I wasn't far away. But I'm screaming to the scene. And when I pull up, I see his cruiser behind a car, but then there's another car that's pulled in kind of awkwardly behind the cruiser. And I'm like, that's kind of weird. And then there's people everywhere surrounding the cop. And I'm like, so I get out, I start ordering people to get back. Nobody's listening. There's a lady, it was a very chaotic scene. There was a lady running around with a Bible, putting it in everybody's face, yelling, end of the world stuff. And I'm like, what the hell? And then there's this one guy who I focused in on right away, the most aggressive one out of the crowd of people. And he's threatening to kill the cop. So I go to deal with him right away because I'm like, I'm going to take you down and put you in cuffs. And I start going up to him. And when I go up to him, he jumps in the driver's seat of the car that's pulled to the side. So, and shuts the door. So now I'm like, I'm trying to figure out what's going on. I'm trying to process. So more cops are kind of showing up, and we're trying to detain people. And it was there were 4 people that were involved in that one car that were causing the chaos. And then there was a poor bastard that was on the traffic stop, like not getting out of his car, and he's like, "What the hell is going on here?"
What
So,
happened?
so we're trying to figure. And the cop's trying to tell me, he's like, "Everybody's going." He's like, "They're all getting arrested," and he's trying to tell us, in short bits of information. He's like, "They pulled up on me. They tried to attack me. Like, everybody's going." So we made the decision. Everybody's getting arrested. And so I go around to the guy in the driver's side, and I'm telling him I'm ordering him out of the car. He's not coming out of the car, not coming out of the car. So he rolls down the window, and he's talking to me through the window. I'm like, "You need to get out of the car. You're under arrest." And you ever see those YouTube videos where you're like, the cop's like, "You're under arrest. You're being detained. You're under," and like, there's so much talking. It's like, when is the cop going to, just go for it? Like, when's he going to arrest this person? Enough is enough. I wasn't that cop. I was that. I told you once. The second time, you're getting cuffed up. Like, I have zero tolerance for that stuff, or had zero tolerance for it. So I told him a few times, because I was like, I'm getting annoyed at this point, and he wouldn't come out of the car. So I reached in, I undid the latch, I open up the door, and I go to grab him. And as I go to grab him, he was a little bigger than me, and he pulls me into the car. So now the fight's on. He's hitting me, I'm punching him. It's an all-out melee in the front seat of the car. He's trying to take off with the car, so he's trying to put it in drive as he's punching me, and hitting the gas is to the floor, so the engine's revving. So when I get sucked into the car, I actually go to the passenger side from the driver's side, and his girlfriend comes in behind the rear passenger side, jumps into the car, and she starts hitting me in the back with right in the back of the neck with a blunt object. It ends up being a cell phone, I find out later. She hit me so hard, it was like a 1 in a million shot. My whole left side goes numb, and she causes what they call a traumatic lipoma, and it presses against my spine. So I lose feeling right on my left side. So it went from, now we're fighting, to a deadly force situation where, I could have used deadly force. So I'm making all these decisions just very quick on the fly. Well, when I got sucked into the car, one of the other people that wasn't detained, they shut the front door to the car. So now I'm in a locked car with the windows up, fighting 2 people in a confined space, and it's a bloodbath. And she's still hitting me. I'm losing feeling on my left side. I'm just hitting the guy as hard as I can with my right arm. And the other cops end up breaking all the windows to the car. They pull her out. I end up pepper spraying him. Now I'm all covered in pepper spray too, but I light him up with pepper spray, and he's still fighting. They end up getting me out, and like, at that point, I'm like, you got to call an ambulance. I'm really messed up. Something's wrong. And so they call an ambulance. They call an ambulance for him because he's injured. They end up getting him, after another scuffle, they get him into the back of the cruiser, handcuffed. He's trying to kick out the window and stuff. He was just like completely going ballistic. So I end up getting transported to the hospital. They identify it's a traumatic lipoma. And they're like, "Okay, you're out for undetermined time. You're going to have surgery. And we're not even sure if you can come back." But this is 2016. I'm a young dad. I've got 2 kids at home, a wife, that I'm the only income. And now I'm out injured, and I'm getting reduced pay. So I'm getting like 60% of my pay, no overtime. And I have to, we're heading into the summer months. So like, we had a vacation plan, we had all this stuff planned. So everything is changed at this point. So.
Wow, man. Wow. So when did you first begin to realize, after that incident, that you were experiencing what might be PTSD? And what were some of the signs or symptoms that you did notice?
So after that event, I already was noticing up to that event that I was hypersensitive a lot and that I was having issues, but I just thought it was because I was working midnights. I thought, I'm sleep deprived. Maybe that's the issue. But when I was put out on medical leave after the event in 2016, I was out on an island, and nobody from my job, guys that I was close with, guys that, I shared these traumatic events with, never reached out to me to check to see if I was okay. Guys that I
Right.
thought I was really tight with never reached out to me. So I was really on my own. And there was and about 30 days after the event, I got a letter from the city where they requested my badge and gun, which was normal protocol when you're injured, but they requested my badge and gun. So they stripped me of my identification as a police officer. So now I went from police officer, that the only thing I knew since I was 21, to just a civilian with no guarantee I was coming back. So I'm out on my own, and I'm starting to struggle. I had some major insomnia after this event, to where I would go days without sleep. And what I would do is start to self-medicate with alcohol. So I started drinking. Now I'm not a big drinker, and I never was, but
Hmm.
I like to tip them back every now and then, and have a good time. I was mostly a social drinker, but I went from a social drinker to, I'm gonna sit in my garage and pound beers, which is unlike at any point in my life. So, but I was so just hurting inside, not only physically but mentally, because of this event. I was having a lot of flashbacks. I was having a lot of issues where it was concerning. And one particular day, I was in my garage and I'd been drinking pretty heavily, and I was thinking, it was like midday, and it was a beautiful summer day. My neighbor's out mowing his lawn, like there are people, like the whole world was going on outside of my garage, and I could see it. But in my garage, I was in a very dark place, and I was sitting there, and I was starting to think about everything that I had been through, throughout my life, and I was kind of doing a lot of negative self-talk, and this one particular incident kept flashing in my mind. And what this incident was is about 3 to 4 weeks before I was injured on the job, I had went to the suicide. And at the suicide was a young lady. She was my age, actually, and she had hung herself in her closet, and her 13-year-old daughter found her. And when I got there, the daughter was in hysterics. She was sitting on the front porch, and she's like, help my mom. And I ran upstairs, and sure enough, she had been deceased for a while. She had hung herself during the night. And but I remember processing that scene, and I was looking at the mom, and this horrific scene. She was hanging in the closet, and I was looking at her. I'm like, she just looks at peace, and she took her own life, but she did it on her own terms. And I remember thinking, like, this is really messed up that I'm thinking this at the time, but I'm like, she just looked at peace. And so on this particular day, in 2016, where I'm sitting in my garage, that memory came into my head. And I'm thinking, I'm already struggling with my family. This is a burden on my family now that I'm injured. I had been having some interpersonal relationship issues where, I was in conflict with a bunch of people in my life, from my wife to my friends. And, I just was self-isolating, and it was really starting to take its toll. And I remember thinking, maybe, I do this on my own terms. Maybe I end the pain. And at the time, I was a climber. I did a lot of tree work, so I had a lot of rope in the garage, and I would always tie knots and stuff because
Hmm.
it's just something I did to relax. And I remember just wrapping the rope around my fingers and looking at the blood, kind of pool in my fingers, and thinking to myself, like, I could do this on my own terms. I can end it all here, and this is it. You know, um, I just didn't care anymore. And so, I finished my beer, I threw the rope uh, up over the beam in the garage, and I'm like, here we go. This is it. I'm done. I'm taking I'm punching my own card here. And so I started taking steps, and started tying the knot. And I heard little footsteps coming around the side of the house, and I hear this little sucking of a pacifier, and I knew right away, who it was. And um, all of a sudden, my youngest son just appeared out of nowhere, and I looked at him, and and I looked at the rope, I looked at him, and he's like, Dad, what are you doing? And it snapped me back in reality right then and there. And I hugged him, broke down, started crying, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. And he's like, Dad, why are you sorry? I'm like, I'm so sorry, I'm so sorry. And the very next day, I started going to therapy. And I went into the therapist and I said, this is what's going on. I'll be honest with you, I wasn't truthful about the attempt. It took a very long time for me to talk about that event.
Sure.
It almost took about 7 years for me to actually talk about it, because it was so I felt like such a failure in life. But I went to therapy, and I was able to work through a lot of my issues. I was able to get in a good place. I went through 2 surgeries on my neck. I was able to come back full duty. When I came back, I sat down with the police chief and I said, because part of the therapist said that you got to be honest with people. And even though I wasn't honest about the suicide part, I went to the chief and I said, Chief, I just want to let you know, while I was out, I was in a very dark place, but I did get some help that might help explain a lot of my issues, that you may have seen me throughout my career, but I'm letting you know that I got some help and I'm in a good headspace. And he's like, and I'll never forget this. I looked at his, when I made eye contact with him, I knew my career was over. Like, I knew I was going to be stigmatized for it. I just knew it, but I knew that going into it, and I was okay with it. So, we had that conversation. He's like, and he did the old, hey, whatever you need. And I'm like, yeah, sure, Chief. Yeah, whatever. But, I just asked him to kind of keep it between us, and that I wanted him to know, because I felt like I needed to tell some supervisor or a supervisor. But then, I thought I was good. And then 2020, man, things got a hell of a lot worse in 2020.
And that seems to be a recurring theme that we've noticed interviewing any police officers on here. You guys are the toughest shell to crack, simply because the not having that backing from chiefs, or even, like you said, some of your colleagues, because they don't feel that you're going to have their back in a time like a critical incident happening. Because, oh, well, this person admitted that they have some mental health issues, or they're suffering with some mental health stuff, and they appear to be weak. That has been the recurring theme that I've heard from a good friend of ours, Josh Shimko. He's dealing with a lot of the same stuff that you have, and he just didn't have that backing from his superiors or his brothers, supposed brothers. And that's the shame of it all. They expect us to come into these high stress jobs and incidences and be able to just continue to perform at that level without having the mental health support and help that we all know that we do need. I think everyone should have a therapist, especially in public safety. So I commend you for being truthful, to your superiors, but, and like you said, that could have put the so-called nail on the coffin for your career, because you were actually honest and open with them and telling them that you've dealt with those type of things.
Yeah, essentially what it did is, and if anybody's listening to this, please speak up, because your life is worth more than your identity as a police officer, first responder. Like, please speak up. I promise you, once you speak up, it gets better, and it's all out there. So please, I'm not trying to deter people from my story and be like, oh, why didn't, like, please speak up. And I didn't realize all this until 2020. Because I'll be honest with you, when I was diagnosed with PTSD in 2016, I didn't take it serious. And I was just like, it's just a label. It's all bullshit. I'm fine. Because that was my whole life. Like, I had a traumatic childhood. I had one of the most messed up childhoods. I talk about a lot in the book, but I kept telling myself, I'm strong in this. I can persevere. I can just grind it out. And I did that a lot in my life, but I regret some of that because it made it worse. And I struggled when I didn't need to struggle. So please speak up. And I'll be honest with you, the police world is screwed up. It really is, especially with all the hostility now towards the police and all this stuff. So, if there's a brother or sister out there struggling, just find that voice, find it in yourself to just tell somebody, because, I'm tired of seeing my brothers and sisters fall. I'm tired of hearing about, suicides and all this stuff. And as somebody who has been on the brink of it and who has crossed that threshold where there was almost a point of no return, I can tell you that, thank God I didn't do it. Thank God my little angel came in and protected me, because God, looking back, like, all the lives I've touched since then, I mean, it's just been an amazing experience.
You're meant to be here, brother, for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, I think we are going to agree, it all starts with compassionate leadership. You have to have that on your side.
Yeah. You gotta have the right people in the right position. Absolutely, man. And that's a huge issue. And as somebody who travels around and talks to folks from all different agencies, all different professions, it's like, I joke about that, not joke, but I say this statement, it's different patch, but same bullshit. It's like, it doesn't matter what your patch is. It's, you get the wrong leaders in there. You get these people that don't humanize the badge. That's a major problem. And that's what I saw in my department, where they didn't humanize it. They didn't give a shit. You were just a number. You were a checkbox.
Yep.
And as a result of that, in 2020 is really where things imploded for me, because I started to have that realization where I can't ignore this anymore. It's beyond repair. And on paper I can repair it, but behind the scenes in my, when I'm by myself, I can't repair this.
Sure.
I need help.
So for people listening that are not familiar with PTSD, what does it actually feel like to live with it day to day?
You have your good days and you have your bad. You have days where it's really hard to pull yourself out of the darkness. There are some really dark days. And for me, it came down to the hypervigilance, where I was so just overstimulated. My amygdala was just, on rapid fire constantly, that I couldn't turn stuff off. Even, I would find myself on family vacations disconnected, where I was watching hands, I was watching body movements. Especially after the attack, I became even worse. And, I could never turn it off. I would go into a room. I'd always put my back to the wall and watch everybody. And that hypervigilance, what that does is that leads to insomnia. And then from the insomnia, lack of sleep, it just gets worse. It's a snowball effect. So then you start making mistakes in your life, and you have a hair trigger with people, all that stuff. And for everybody, PTSD looks a little different. But for me, I wasn't enjoying things that I normally enjoyed. My relationships with people were fractured, and there were a lot of issues with that, where, I couldn't break myself from just this negative thought process. So, but yeah, if you find yourself just being off all the time, there's probably an issue. There's something contributing. And sometimes it's subconscious. Sometimes you don't even realize, until after everything happened in 2020 and I started to get help, real help, true help. I didn't realize how deep my trauma went, and how things from 30 years ago were affecting me. And I talk about a lot in the book, but, I didn't realize how deep and deeply rooted it was.
So in public safety, as we sort of discussed, there's often pressure to push it down or suck it up, and keep it moving. What was it like for you to come to terms with you actually reaching out for that real help that you needed?
So it really took the final implosion. really. So again, 2026, I came out of that. So really 2017, I thought I was okay. 2020 pandemic came into our world and really started to screw things up. A lot of deaths, a lot of things going on. During that time too, the opioid crisis was at its full bloom. So I was responding to a lot of death calls. I mean, it seemed like every day I was dealing with somebody that was dying. I was telling people's family members they lost a loved one, and it was really having a negative impact. And I was given an opportunity. I'd put in for detective 16 times throughout my career, and really what it came down to is I didn't kiss enough ass in the department to get it. Like, I'm going to be frank, like, we're not going to be around the bush. Like, I didn't kiss people's ass. I didn't go out to drink with them. And because I didn't kiss ass, I wasn't going to be made a detective. So I was finally given that opportunity. They told me, hey, it's 6 months to prove yourself. Your life is shut down for 6 months. And that was in 2020, June of 2020. So I'm like, giddy up. I need to go to detective division. I need to get the hell away from patrol. So I went and did that. My first month was absolutely insane as a detective, constantly getting called in. And I wasn't I was called an investigator. They didn't even give me the big D, but I was called an investigator. I had to prove myself. And again, the department I belonged to was very close knit, and a lot of people drank together, hung out together. So that was the fast track in my department. So I was on the outskirts, but I came in and I'm like, something, I'm going to prove all these assholes wrong, and I'm going to come in and I'm going to show them I could be a detective. So my wife and I agreed, yep, go for it. Like, but we'll figure it out, but this is going to change our life. I had 5 years to retirement. So I was just going to ride it out as a detective. That was my plan. But we were rocking in the city, man. Like it was insane. We had like homicides. We had all kinds of shit going on. And I was constantly getting exposed to that. Sleep deprivation was a very real issue. I was getting called out all the time because another thing being an attempt detective is you get called out constantly. You're on the call out list all the time. Like you don't have that seniority to not get called in. So, and then I had a supervisor who was a real asshole that was screwing with me, always constantly up my ass for stuff, critiquing me. You know, who's that type of guy that probably should never been promoted, has a very shaky past, and but knew the right people, so he got the position, and he was riding me, and you know, it was just like it was the constant pressure, and they were putting me in positions I should have never been put in. And I was telling them I'm kind of getting overwhelmed here, but they didn't give a shit. And they're like, if you want detective, you gotta do this. And then finally, I got an opportunity to do some undercover work, and I was doing some undercover work, and shit went sideways on an operation. And I can't talk about it because I remember I told you that I'll sign the non-disclosure, but essentially what it came down to was I was put in a position I wasn't trained for. And at the time I was so messed up in the head, man. I had been drinking heavy. I was trying to cope with all the stress. I wasn't sleeping. I was constantly having flashbacks from all the stuff I was seeing. I wasn't handling anything. My personal life was starting to fall apart. So they put me in this position that no officer or detective should ever be put in, but they were laughing about it and thought it was funny, and shit went sideways very quickly. And I came out of it in shock, and I went to the deputy chief and I said, Chief, you know, who does the internals or investigations? I'm the one that dropped the dime and blew the whistle on the operation. And I said, Chief, I can't believe this happened, but X, Y, and Z happened. And he's like, Keven, you're all set. We got you. We should never put you in that position. I'm so sorry this happened to you. Like, let's get your shit straight. And I went to the union and I said, you know, I got to go out. I need to go on administrative leave. Like, I'm struggling. I'm drinking too much. I know what happened in 2016. I'm having thoughts of that again. Like, I need to distance myself. So they put me on administrative leave. So I go on administrative leave. They end up doing an investigation as to what happened in the undercover. They came to me, and around the same time, and I talk about this in the book, around the same time, the position, the full-time detective position, I was pretty much slotted, you know, I was going to get it. This female comes in and just takes it. And we end up finding out, you know, she had a relationship with the supervisor. So it was a whole issue. So I was all pissed off about that. And I came in and I made a comment, and I should have never, you know, this day I regret the comment, but I made a comment in the locker room thinking it was just my buddy standing there, but I didn't realize there were two other guys around the corner. They heard the comment. They went and reported it to administration. So the administration came to me and said, did you make this comment? I'm like, yeah, I did. And actually, let me adjust it because it was a lot worse than what was told to you. Mm-hmm. So I told him the exact comment, and got grilled by the city attorney. She was a man hater, and she came after me. And I was just like, yeah, I said it. I did it. Like, and I blew the whistle on this operation. So maybe you should put more focus on this operation and never put a cop in this position again. So I was really hostile towards the city about this because there was a lot of things going on internally that they were never dealing with. And they would just allow these supervisors to do all this crap and put people in bad spots. So I had a bit of an attitude, but at the same time, I was so just struggling with my mental health again. I should have never went into those interviews without an attorney, but I was like, I didn't care.
Yeah.
And the union kept telling me, hey, shut up. I'm like, no, like, this is bullshit. Like, I shouldn't be treated this way. So all that goes down. I end up coming back. So I got into some therapy again. I come back about 4 months later. I stopped drinking. I come back. I'm in a good headspace. And things are, we're still in the pandemic. So shit's still going on. People are dying. And I had this one supervisor who I was really tight with. We came up together, and he was on the lucky track. Like, he went from sergeant to lieutenant very quickly. He was a shift commander, great officer, but a better friend. Not just a good officer, but a really good friend. Like, he always had my back. And he was my sounding board. He was the guy I always went to when shit hit the fan. And so during this all internal and all this stuff, he comes to me, he goes, hey, they're going to give you a 10-day rip. Just take the 10-day and like call it. He's like, just move on. He goes, treat it as a vacation. I'm like, yep, no problem. I'll take 10 days for this. It was mostly because of the comment I made. It had nothing to do with the undercover operation. It was the comment. They were really pissed about that. Because I guess when you hit them with their ego, they get like that.
Oh, yeah.
so they come after me for that. And I walk right in the chief's office. And I'm like, I'll take the 10-day rip. I'm like, when can I start? He's like, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 1 day off for 10 weeks. you work overtime, you can cover that one day. So it was actually, the chief was really cool about it. And he knew they messed up. Like there was no doubt. He could never tell me formally, but I've done enough interviews and interrogation. Like I know when people are being honest. Like he was just like, let's make this go away. So I'm like, cool. So we made it go away. I took my suspension proudly, by the way, took my suspension, was in a really good headspace. I'm like, all right, I've got like a little over 4 years to retire. Like I just got to ride it out. I'm going to evening shift. I'm done. I'm going to hide from the brass and I'm just going to ride it out. And at the time I was also teaching as a college professor. So like I didn't need to work overtime. I was good. I was in a good place. Well, one day I come in and I was kind of like rushing through the day because I was teaching during the morning and I come in for evening shift. And one of the loudmouth cops comes up to me. He's like, hey, did you hear about, so-and-so? And I'm like, and it was my buddy, the supervisor. And I'm like, no. I'm like, what's up? He's like, oh, he's in the hospital. He's got COVID. I'm like, come on. Like, that's bullshit. He's like, yeah. So I'm like, all right. So I text my buddy and I'm like, hey man, hope you're doing well. Like, stay in the fight. He texts me back. He's like, he's thinking of me. He goes, dude, you stay in the fight. He goes, don't give up and don't let them, keep targeting you. Like stay in the fight yourself.
Yeah.
He's like, I'll be good. It was the last time I ever talked to him. He died a week later. And that hit me hard. That hit me really, really hard. And so we go to his funeral and I went to my wife and I said, I know this is probably not appropriate, but can we take the boys? Because he knew my boys. And I'm like, can we take the boys? I mean, cops' funerals are horrible. And I'm like, but, I really need you guys. Like, I'm in a fragile place here. If you guys could just come with me. And my wife's a saint. She's just a beautiful human. And she was like, yeah, whatever you need. And so she comes with me and the boys come with me and we're sitting there and it was a celebration of life. So it wasn't like a full blown funeral.
Sure.
So it was a celebration of life at a hotel. So the first thing I walk in, I look around, I'm like, this, my friend deserves better than this. So that was like my first thought, like this needs to be a better planned. It's a half-ass ceremony. And so I'm already kind of annoyed by that. And we kind of sit off to the side because at that point, like, people are all talking about me and all, and I didn't really care. I didn't care at the time, but I knew they were talking about my mental health stuff. So we're sitting in the corner and people are getting up and they're talking about my friend and they're saying all these things. And I'm like thinking to myself, I'm like, people are so fake. Like I know this one particular person, the same supervisor that was screwing with me when I was doing the detective work, was up there talking about how they were friends and all this stuff. And I'm like, you are the biggest hypocrite. You did nothing but screw with this guy his entire career. And now you're up saying all these wonderful things. Like you shouldn't even be talking at this. And I'm like getting really like, I'm fuming at this point. And my wife's like kicking me under the table because I'm like making little side comments. And so then they get the last call. And I've never ever sat through a last call, but that is the hard. It's like hearing taps. It's the hardest thing to sit through where they do the radio call. And so I break down when I hear his badge number calls over the radio, and I like look at my wife. I'm like, let's get the hell out of here. And so we leave. And I'm like, shit, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this job. The whole ride home, I'm like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. I can't be around these people. Like, it's not everybody, but it's a certain few, and they're the ones that the decision makers. So I'm like, I can't do it. And so we went home, and I was already struggling with insomnia. I was worried I was going to start drinking again. Like I was having all this, stress from my friend's death and some other things were going on. I had got a doctor's note saying I couldn't be ordered in for midnights because we're having major staffing issues and they were screwing with me on that. I got the union involved, the city involved. They basically threatened me if I refuse another Mando, they were going to fire me. So I finally said, something, screw it. I said, I'm going to take the next Mando. So I come in on a Saturday and, supervisor laughs. He's like, haha, like, I know you got a doctor's note, but you're Mando tonight. And I'm like, okay, I'll take it. He's like, what? Thinking he's going to write me up. And I'm like, yeah, I'll take it. So I go and I hide up in the northern part of the city. I got a nice, quiet district. And I go to this bullshit alarm and like, I'm leaving the alarm and I'm like having all this anxiety. And all of a sudden I feel the heart palpitations and I'm like, shit, I think I'm having a heart attack. My left side's starting to go numb. I'm like, something bad is happening. So I pull over my cruiser and try to call it for help, but it doesn't really come through. And I'm ripping off my bulletproof vest and I'm like just trying to breathe. I couldn't breathe. And my buddy comes in sideways thinking, I got shot or something, and comes in. And he's like, and I'm like, I think I'm having a heart attack. And I'm like thinking too, I'm like, I'm 40 years old. I'm in that bracket of, the Widowmaker.
Yeah.
And my buddy's like, he knows right away. He's like, dude, you're having a panic attack. This isn't a heart attack. You're having a panic attack. Like just breathe. Like, and he helps me get through it. And he tells me, he's like, listen, you can't stay on duty. You you gotta go home. Like, this is bad, man. Like, you can't be in this. You can't be doing this. So I drive in, I call my wife. I'm like, listen, I just had a panic attack. Like, I don't know what to do. And she's like, come home. I'm like, I can't. Like, I'm Mando. They're gonna fire me. She's like, she was an explicit, but she's basically like, F them, come home, go turn in your badge and gun. You're done. I'm like, I don't know. So I drive into the supervisor. I tell him, and of course, blank expression, doesn't give a shit. Just no compassion whatsoever. And it's basically like, okay, I need your badge, your gun, and we're gonna put you. I called the chief, and we're putting you on administrative leave. I'm like, okay, whatever. So I drive home. My wife meets me at the door, and she's like, are you okay? And I'm like, I don't know what the hell just happened. But eventually this all leads to me getting back into therapy again, because I go through EAP, and through the therapy, I decide enough is enough. Like, I try to go for a disability pension. The city basically tells me that it's not like cancer. It's not like a broken back. We can't prove this happened on the job. And because of that, we're going to fight you on the disability pension for PTSD. Now, it's been well documented. I went to multiple doctors. I had all the paperwork, but they just kept fighting me. And so I was like, enough is enough. So April Fool's Day 2022, I put my resignation in, and I'm like, I'm done. And I resigned and went on to work as a college professor.
Good for you, though. I mean, taking your mental health first over a career that didn't support you. That's like I said, that's the recurring thing from a lot of the police officers that we do speak to, is that they don't have that backing.
Yeah.
So, Kevin, what would you say to a first responder who may be struggling right now but feels they can't admit it?
Let's face it, the hardest thing is to admit you have a problem.
Mm-hmm.
The hardest, and for me, I denied it. I knew all the signs. I was a peer support guy in the police department. I had been trained in it. I was a crisis intervention officer. I had committed probably 1,000 people for mental health related issues throughout my career. I always had compassion. I always wanted people to get help. But when it turned inwards and I looked at everything that was going on internally with me, I couldn't find the right words to say. And I found out many years later that with PTSD, sometimes putting into words is really hard to do. So eventually, for me, where I really started to heal and found some peace was through writing. Now, that might not work for everybody, but when I went out originally in 2020, I started writing my book, and I poured my heart and soul into it, thinking nobody would ever see this. And I wrote everything down. And then about a year later, I reread a lot of it, and I'm like, wow, there's a lot of deep hurt here and a lot of trauma. So I was able to find my words that way. For other people, it might be other ways. I have a buddy who suffered pretty severely from PTSD, and he used running, and he was able to just go out and punish himself on a run. But afterwards, he had the clarity to figure out what words to use to ask for help. So I think if anybody is out there struggling, it's take a step back, take a couple deep breaths, and just try to find those right words. And sometimes just saying, I need help is it. That's all you need.
That's the hardest thing to do, is admitting that.
And you're not broken. Listen, you're not broken. You're not, if anything, and when anybody buys my book and I personally describe it, I always put, one of the most courageous things you can do is speak up and ask for help. That's what I put in my book. I always put a personal message to everybody, and it's different with everybody, but that's one of the lines I use. To me, listen, you could do all this crazy stuff as a police officer, firefighter, whatever, you could be a quote hero on the job. But to me, the real heroes are the ones that ask for help. They're the ones that come forward and say, I'm struggling. Because it takes so much to say those words that I think, anybody that does it, hats off. It's not, once you do it though, I will tell you this, once you do it, the sky's the limit. You're going to get the help you need if you say it to the right people.
Yeah. That's how I feel also. Like when I finally admitted and I said, I need the help. I need the help. I need to get medicated. A lot more opened up for me. And I felt that sort of weight come off of my own shoulders. And I'm like, okay, yeah, there's a problem here, but there's a reason for it, and it's finally, I'm definitely in a better headspace than I was. It's nice to be able to, my wife to be like, that's the real you. That's the real you.
Yeah.
And I'm like, that's what you deserve, is the real me,
Yeah.
So Kevin, super important thing right here. You founded the first in tactics and quiet Corner Peer Support Group. Can you tell us about the mission behind those organizations and what they're doing for our first responder community?
Sure. So I got to put a little context here, just a quick little, like, the reason why it was started. So when I left in 2022 policing, I was working in the college world as a director, criminal justice and psychology. So I was working in the academic world. So I was separated from the first responder community. So it was the first time really in a very long time, 20 something years, where I was separated from service. And I'll be honest with you, when I left, I never wanted anything to do with I never wanted anything to do with public safety. I just wanted to go hide. And one night, my oldest son had just turned 14, and he came in the room and he's like, "Dad, I'm 14 now. You remember that promise you made?" And I knew right away. So I tried to play with him, like, "Yeah, we're getting you a guitar. Don't worry." He's like, "No, Dad." He's like, "You told me when I was 14 I could join the fire department." And I had a little bit of anxiety about that. And I'm like,
Sure.
because I had just gone through so much. I'm like, "I don't know if we should do this, buddy." So I tried to talk him out of it. And he's like adamant. He's like, "Nope, Dad, you promised this is going to happen." So signed him up the local firehouse that I had volunteered in before. And the chief said, "The only way I'm taking him is if you come back." And I'm like, I don't really want to deal with people. But I'm like, all right, I'll come back. Well, anybody that knows that goes into the service, you get that bug, right? Like, you get back in there, you're like, yeah, I'm feeling it again. And I was actually in a good space. But I was noticing a lot more. I was doing a lot of my brothers and sisters struggling with their mental health. And it was a little alarming, how many were just undiagnosed, how many people were almost like walking around like shells of themselves. And these are guys and gals that I knew from years ago that I haven't seen in a while. And I'm like, wow, we got a problem here in the fire service, especially up where I'm volunteering. So all that stuff's going on. And I start first in tactics as an educational initiative to basically try to improve some of the training up here in the Northeast. And so I started doing a lot of mental health training and talking more openly about my own struggles. And I doing a lot of these presentations and just start going around doing all that stuff. And as this is going on, my son ends up getting exposed to two very traumatic calls. One was a motor vehicle fatality, and the other one was a puppy that passed away in a fire. And he had to do CPR on the puppy that I didn't realize he was doing because I was inside the building. And I talk about it in great detail in the book, but it was one of those things, like, it was a back-to-back incident. Also during this, we had a CPR call that came in as a fall victim that him and I responded to. I ended up doing CPR on the guy, and it turned into a save. So he got to see somebody actually, that survived from CPR, but then he also saw a fatality. So he had like all these calls back to back, and I was trying to protect him, but it's really hard to do when you're the only one at the call or something happens and you got to transition to rescue mode. So I was finding I was struggling a lot with that. So I do this program called Spot the Signs, where it's basically like my book in a presentation form, and I talk about PTSD and how to see the signs of it and what you do. And so I invited both my boys to it because I figured they're old enough to see it, and they had never heard my story firsthand. They never knew about it. And they just knew Dad left policing because he had some mental health issues. So they sat through the presentation, and my oldest son came up to me afterwards crying and hugged me, and he's like, "Dad, I'm so blown away by this. Like, I can't believe all this happened." And he's like, "Thank you for sharing this." And it was a wonderful connection we had. My youngest son is very analytical. He's like, "Dad, it all makes sense. The garage, this, that." He was connecting all the dots. And so, as a dad, it was a very proud moment because my sons now are able to talk. Like, growing up, I never talked about mental health stuff. So my boys were able to do that. Well, during all this time, so it's during that month, it happened in October, I reconnected with a buddy of mine who was now the chief of the Dayville Firehouse, who was also a member when I was a junior member in the same firehouse, 20 something years ago. I was able to connect with him, and we started talking about mental health stuff, and he knew about the Spot the Signs course and invited me to the firehouse to do it. So we did this course, and we started talking. We're like, we have so many people in our community struggling. We got to do something. Like, we got to figure something out. So the first thing we did is we established a nonprofit, and we called it the Quiet Corner Peer Support Group. Not really knowing where we were going to go with this, but we established that. Then we went out and we purchased a golden retriever therapy dog and a puppy with the full intention of raising it to be a first responder therapy dog. So his wife owns Evergreen Farms, and she donated the money to purchase the dog. And so we did all that very, very quickly after establishing the nonprofit. And then we kind of put it out there as feelers. Hey, we're in the area, we're thinking about doing this. And then it just exploded. I mean, that was last December we established everything. And since then, I mean, I don't know what's happened in my life. It's just completely, and we went in like hyperdrive. And we've had so many amazing things happen. Our peer group went from just 2 guys establishing a nonprofit to we have 30 members. We have chaplains, medical doctors, physical therapists, firefighters, police officers, therapists, EMDR therapists. We have community members that are just involved because they're passionate about helping first responders. We have military folks because our nonprofit serves not only first responders, but also military veterans. We're in the process right now of building a wellness center. So we're able to secure money from the town through a grant. So we're building that. It's a 2,400 square foot facility. We decided, so I get asked this all the time, peer group, why isn't it just firefighters? And so my response to that is we don't always just deal with firefighters. We deal with EMS folks. We deal with police officers. We deal with military folks. So why not include them in our group? Why not include somebody that does yoga? Have them be part of the team because they offer free yoga for folks.
That's an outlet for people.
Yeah. So our view and approach is a multifaceted, multi-layered approach. Because if we can't handle it with just say talk therapy, that's where we bring our EMDR therapist in. If we can't handle it with that, maybe we need a chaplain. Maybe we need somebody, maybe someone's more religious than they are, so we try to hit it from every which angle. And one of the things we decided to do very quickly, now this is somewhat controversial in certain circles, and sometimes I get a lot of questions about this, but right now, universally across the U.S., everybody does CISD, so critical incident stress debriefing. Typically, it's they come in 3 days after an event, they sit in a circle, and everybody talks about a different part of that event, and they talk about the trauma, and then they hash it out in there. And and here's the thing: I've done CISDs as a participant. I've been involved in a lot of crazy stuff in my career. I'm not the guy that's going to speak up, and I will now, but back then I wasn't going to be that guy. And there's a lot of me's in those groups where they're just not going to talk about their trauma, especially if you're like, that guy in that group is an asshole. I'm not going to say anything. I'm not going to give him ammo to come at me 6 months from now. So I'm just not going to say anything. And that's a flaw in critical incident stress debriefing. That is a major, major flaw. And the CISD system is so outdated and old school that when we looked at it as a team early on, this was back in January, and we looked at it, I was adamant. I'm like, we are not doing it this way. What we're going to do instead is this program called ASAP. So it's called Acute Stress Adaptive Protocol. It is not EMDR, but it has EMDR protocols, very similar to EMDR in it, and it's peer-led. So it's a 32-hour training course. Vermont First Responder Wellness Center does the training. So we hired them, we contracted them to come out. We trained 18 of our members in this. This is back in February, in this 32-hour course. And then we immediately started to deploy it. And the beautiful thing about this program is you can work on whatever the hell you want to work on when you come in with us. It could be in a group setting, it can be in a one-on-one, but nobody knows the trauma you're working on. It's so subjective. And we've had people come through it. So we've done 32 ASAPs since we started doing it in February. All the 32, everybody comes out the other end feeling great, hardly any issues. If we do have an issue, we'll do the ASAP with them. And if they're coming back to us and saying, listen, I'm still off, or, it didn't really work the way I thought it was going to work, we hook them up with our EMDR clinician. He does EMDR 2.0, which 2.0 is like an EMDR nuke. It comes in and it smokes out whatever trauma's left. And, people are coming out the other side of it. And we're seeing people that, I'll use myself as an example. So I processed my friend who died in that car wreck when I was 8 years old. I've been hanging on to that trauma my entire life. It has been just this cloud over me. In my darkest moments, I go back to that scene and I have anxiety. Now, this is 30 years later. First thing I worked on with the EMDR clinician was that event. I said, I got to get past this. I can't, every time I just say his name, I get a little hitch and, where I get upset. So he goes, okay, we're going to smoke this out. He's like, it's going to be, you're going to have to get in it. You're going to have to go back to that day and you're going to have to recall all of it, but we're going to help you process it. And he did. And it took about an hour. But we smoked the shit out of that. And it came out, and I came out the other side, and I slept the best I have ever slept in my life. And it took about 3 days for the effects of it to wear off, but I came out the other side. And now when I recall it, I don't have that negative emotional impact. It doesn't give me the anxiety. I can look at the scene, and it's not having that impact. And now, so what I did is I went through my entire life, all the traumatic events, everything I've talked about today, and some beyond that. And I worked on each thing individually. And, it's making me a stronger peer person, a peer specialist. It's giving me the drive and the motivation to work with others, unlike anything I've ever had in my life. So, but the thing is, if you're going to get into this game, you're going to get into peer support, you got to work on your own traumas.
Yeah.
You can't bring that into the mix. It's not fair to the folks you're working with, and it's not fair to you, because you're just going to re-traumatize yourself. So to get back to CISD, that's why I don't agree with it, because all you're doing is re-traumatizing folks. And I know there's some professionals out there that have a lot more degrees than me that are going to disagree with me, but I'm sorry, I've lived through it. And when I've lived through something and I've seen both sides, CISD and ASAP, ASAP's the way to go, man. That's the future of peer support. That is going to save lives. That's going to save careers. I wish I had this 15 years ago. I wouldn't be in the position I am today. I probably would have retired. But, hey, I wouldn't be here either. So I can't really, I just got to kind of look at it, in a positive.
Yeah. So we already met Hope, your therapy dog there.
Yeah.
What role has she played in your own healing, and how do you see therapy dogs making a difference for others in public safety?
So to be clear, and I talk about this in the book, but my last dog was Buddy when I was a kid. So I haven't had a dog since my whole adult life. I didn't have a dog. Always been a cat person. And when we decided to get a therapy dog, I was like, listen, I'm going to read all these books. I'm going to figure this out. Like, I'm going to train her. Like, I was all like, I got this. And then, the reality set in. Number one, I probably should have told my wife I was getting a dog, which is an issue. But and she's great about it now. But, it's one of those things that the expectations were really high, but then you realize, it's still a puppy. She's still a puppy. You got to be patient, and training takes time. So, she's been in some pretty intense training since it was probably around April. We started doing some intense training, and I've seen her come around big time. But our first call out with her was about a month after we got her, because we decided right away as a group, we're like, something, we're not going to hold her back because you're supposed to have the dog for 18 months before it could be fully certified. Like, we're going to put her in the mix right away. We're going to get her in the firehouse. She's going to be climbing on trucks. She's going to be around firefighters. She's going to be around police officers. Like, we're going to just completely embed her in the first responder and military community and just see what happens. So we did that, and it's paid off big time. And her first call out was a pretty traumatic event. And when we went there as a peer team, we were trying to talk to the first responders, and everybody shut down. Everybody was in their own headspace, and we were trying to just get them to work with us and try to figure out what they needed for resources. And I let Hope go, and I'm like, get to work. And that's her cue. And she goes, and she just starts sniffing everybody, and they start petting her and cuddling with her. And the next thing we know, everybody's kind of like talking to us, and they're like, we're not having a CSID moment, but they were starting to open up, and we were able to get everybody in that call out services, and we got them into some therapy. We got them the help they need. But I'm telling you, if it wasn't for Hope that day, I think we would have been up against it. And Hope up in our community has been on the news a lot, has been all over social media. So everybody, I can't go anywhere in my town or the Northeast without people being like, where's Hope? And I'm like, you guys realize I don't bring her everywhere, but she is, she's the driving force behind this. She really is. And, since we got Hope, we have 2 more dogs. So we have 3 dogs total on the team. 2 of which are already trained, but they're from other departments, and they lend their dogs to us. And the plan is to have more dogs and incorporate them as part of our peer support model, because it is amazing to see these dogs work and to see people react to the dogs. And as far as my own healing, when I first got Hope, and I released the book, and she was with me the night I released the book and told everybody it was coming out. And to have her by my side and just to have that support from her has been amazing. And it's one of those things I know I could have done it, but it's made it a little easier to take that next step, having her by my side and having her, it's almost like it's a team approach.
Sure. Man's best friend.
100%.
It is what it
100%.
is.
100%. And she actually, so we just released her book. So she did a memoir about her first 6 months in training. That was just released September 4th. It's called Pause for Hope. And her book talks about how unprepared I was the first couple weeks of her training. And then it gets into her call outs and all that stuff. So, but I wanted to do something from her perspective. I just thought after writing the first book, I needed to kind of shift,
Sure.
the momentum to something a little lighter.
Very cool. So in regards to your book, you recently released that book called Pushing It Down. What inspired you to write it, and what do you hope readers take away from your story?
So in 2020, like I said earlier, I came out of that and I needed somewhere to just purge everything. I needed to get everything out there. So I still wasn't sleeping. So I would stay up and literally write until the sun came up. And I wrote, the original manuscript was about 600 pages.
Wow.
And it was like a court, I joke about it, but it was like a courtroom drama. It was just, I was like, I can't make myself a victim. I'm not a victim in this. And I don't want anybody to think for a second I'm a victim. I did what I did throughout everything because a lot of it was led by the trauma from my childhood, from my early years as a first responder, and then my career. I had all this cumulative trauma that I never dealt with. So the decisions I was making, it doesn't excuse those decisions. It doesn't excuse my attitude towards a lot of these things. But, I wanted to convey that just because you put on a uniform doesn't give you a clean slate. The day you start whatever first responder world you enter, your trauma doesn't start that day. You're bringing in baggage, whether you realize it or not. So that's one thing that's a theme I realized very quickly in my book. And once I put it on paper and put the timeline there, I realized there was a ton of trauma that I never dealt with. And as a result of that, essentially it imploded my career. And what I say, Mark is my friend who died in 1990. When he passed away, it gave me purpose. But that same purpose is what almost killed me 20 something years later. It gave me that purpose and drive, but unfortunately I was so just headlong into it. And I didn't realize how deep I was going and how bad it was getting until literally 2016, where I went, oh, wow, I got a major problem here. So it wasn't until I wrote the book that I realized that the timeline of it all.
So Kevin, for first responders listening who might be struggling, which a lot of us are, or even for families who love someone in public safety, what resources or steps would you recommend as a starting point?
So having that difficult conversation is probably the first step. My wife, if she didn't come to me and really pry it out of me, I probably wouldn't have spoken up when I did. So it's having that loved one to give you that comfort and support is probably the first step. I am going to highly, highly recommend EMDR therapy. Highly recommend. I think if you're a first responder or military veteran and you're suffering, go find an EMDR therapist, because that is the stuff that is changing the landscape of peer support. It's changing the landscape of processing trauma. If you get a good EMDR therapist, I'm telling you right now, you're going to get through it. And you're going to come out the other side a new person. And, talk therapy, listen, that's great. I did talk therapy for 10 years and it helped a little bit to get the anxiety down. But in 1 hour of EMDR therapy, it pretty much replaced 10 years of talk therapy. So, that's, I highly recommend that. The ASAP, I am a huge advocate, and I will continue to be a huge advocate of ASAP. I think that is changing the landscape as well. I think having a good quality peer support group, and I'm not talking about a peer support group that goes through a 3-hour training and, hey, we're a peer support group. Like, you have to continually train. You have to continually analyze your program. As somebody who runs the peer support group, that's constantly what I'm doing. And I know we've only been around for a little less than a year, but we are constantly evolving. And I think that's important to have that, because sometimes as a first responder, you don't want to have that conversation with your significant other. You don't want to, so you need that peer to lean on. Mm-hmm. So if you have somebody in your department that you really trust, go to them and speak up. And listen, at the end of the day, if you have to leave the service, you have to leave the service. The service doesn't define you as a human being. Okay. What defines you is your family, your interpersonal relationships. It's not the uniform. And I know that's tough for people to understand. But if you hide behind that uniform, someday you're going to retire. Someday you're going to move on and you're going to have nothing. And that's where people implode after their careers because they don't have anything to lean on.
Yeah. So what role do you think peer support and community play in breaking the stigma and moving towards mental wellness?
So I'll be honest with you, and I didn't realize this until we started the peer support group, but we can't do this without the community. We have a wonderful community up in the Northeast. We are called the Quiet Corner. There's 20-something towns up here, and without their support, I don't think we could be as successful as we are. And I will tell you, it's a beautiful moment when we have a community event and people from all walks of life are coming over and asking what we do, and we tell them, and they're like, I have a loved one who's a first responder. Can I send them over to you? I'm worried about them. I'm like, this is what it's all about, is this networking. So I think to be a good peer support group, it's great to have it within your agency, but within your agency, you're restricted. You're really, really restricted on what you can do because there's usually a policy and procedure in your agency. And let's face it too, sometimes you're not going to go to your own peers. Sometimes, it's just not going to happen. Especially smaller agencies. So having it outside of the actual agency and doing it the way we're doing it as a nonprofit, I think is definitely the way to go. And, the beautiful thing about us too is we supplement departments. So if they have their own peer support group, we don't come in and try to take over. We get them the ASAP training, we get them the resources they need, and we tell them, hey, when you have to hit the world's imploding button and we need help, hit this button and we're coming. And I'm coming with an entire team and we're going to follow up with you and we're going to get everybody back whole. So, having all that is important, but really what it comes down to is having people that have been through the darkness, come out the other side and lead with passion. And you can't replace that with any training. I'm sorry, but real world experience. And that's what I look for in my members is real world experience. I want them, but I make sure, and I'll be honest with you, if I know they have a checkered past, they have some trauma, they're going to my EMDR therapist, they're working through it. We're getting them back on their feet because you can't do this if you're hiding something. You can't, if you're trying to keep that below the surface, you will never be able to do this job effectively. You can fake it, but people are going to see through your bullshit. So, it's really important that you make yourself whole. And that's, I still let people join the team, but I'm like, you're going to work with our therapist for a little bit. And then when you feel like you're ready, we're going to have a conversation. I'm going to make sure you're ready because I don't want to re-traumatize you. I don't want you to go in a dark place and potentially harm yourself because you feel like you can't take it anymore. As somebody who's been on that edge, I don't want that in my team. So I care very deeply about each one of my members. And they're truly family to me, that I watch out for them and watch for the signs and make sure they're okay.
Absolutely. That's like you said, you have to be squared away with yourself to help others. It's just like self-love. You have to love yourself before you love someone else.
Hell yeah.
That's what it
is.
Hell
yeah. You got to be able to look at yourself in the mirror and say, I can do this and truly answer that correctly, and be honest with yourself. Because if you can't, we'll get you the help you need to get there. But, we want you whole first.
Got to work on yourself first, for sure.
Yep.
We're at that point here in it, okay? So if you could leave our listeners with one message about resilience, hope, or mental health, what would it be?
If you're in the darkness right now and you're at a low and you're listening to this, just understand the minute you say, I need help to the right person, you are going to feel a sense of relief. It's still going to take some work. You're still going to have to grind it out. But those words are so powerful when it comes to your own mental health and getting out of that darkness, that just asking for help and grinding it out. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. You'll get there, but don't give up. Don't give in to the voices. Don't give in to the darkness. Just keep pressing forward because you'll get there.
Dr. Keven McNeill, thank you, sir. And if you would, let everyone know where they can pick up your book, all your social media platforms, let them know where they can find you.
Sure. So A couple different platforms. Amazon, you can get the book Pushing It Down or Pause for Hope, or you can get it on TikTok. It's just my name, Keven McNeill. Unfortunately, my parents misspelled my first name, so it's Keven. But you can find it on TikTok, and you can also get it through the website firstintactics.com. And our website for the peer support group is www.qcps.net, or you can find us on Facebook for Quiet Corner Peer Support Group. Feel free to reach out to me, and if I can help you out in any way, I'm willing to do so, and I'll send you whatever resources we have.
Awesome. All that stuff we'll post down in the detailed description on our YouTube page. If you'd like to be on the show, just like Dr. Keven here, hit us up at twwcpodcast@proton.me. Dr. Keven McNeill, thank you, sir. We really appreciate your time. Thanks for all the insight and all the information that you gave. Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
All right, guys. Have a good one. Thank you.